Hello and welcome to Unfudge Your Marketing. This is a show where I chat with business owners about their past marketing experiences that didn't go as planned, and most importantly, the lessons learned for all of you, our listeners. I am your host. I'm Christy Mitchell. I'm a marketing strategist and consultant, and I work with service-based business owners who have built their business on referrals and word of mouth, and they know in order to take it to the next level, they need to finally think strategically about their marketing. Today, I am really excited to welcome Nicole Cherie Oden to the show. Nicole is an attorney licensed in the state of California for over 12 years with her own boutique virtual law firm, Nicole Cherie Oden Law, PC. Nicole works with online service providers and digital product creators to protect their online businesses and brands legally with custom contracts and policies or legal templates that they can customize for their unique businesses and federal trademark registration. With that, I will welcome Nicole.
Hi.
Hello. So excited to have you on.
I'm excited to chat. This is a fun topic. I've enjoyed listening to your previous episodes.
Awesome. Good. I'm so glad. So I like to give our listeners just a little bit of backstory on how we know each other. So you and I met through a business coach. We were both a part of her group, and we've known each other for a couple of years now. And I have purchased a bunch of your templates for my own business. I send anyone who's asking me about like legal stuff that needs to go on your website, like privacy policy, terms and conditions, I send them all your way. And then most recently, we worked together last year to file my trademark for Marketing Uncomplicated.
Which is officially registered now.
It is officially registered, and I hear I have the hard copy coming on the way. So
you do.
Very excited for that. It's been an absolute joy working with you. I appreciate all the expertise that you have in your space. And I appreciate your willingness to come on the show and talk about your past marketing experiences. So when I'm glad we can all laugh about it, right? I hope that my guests, don't start crying on the show talking about their past experiences with marketing. So when we were preparing for this chat, you had mentioned that you had a past experience with a website person and kind of some of the things that were all supposed to be included in your work with them and then kind of how that panned out. So where would you like to begin the discussion on that topic?
Gosh. Well, it's funny because I have two businesses. I have my law firm and I have my online business providing the templates and the resources for other online service providers and digital product creators. And that business has grown exponentially the past few years. And so I kind of was scrappy at the beginning of both businesses and launched my website on my own. And I had a little bit of help behind the scenes, but I mean, I was doing a lot of things by myself and it got to the point of I have to bring somebody on. Otherwise, I'm not going to continue to grow. And I'm not a techie person, like by any means. So trying to figure out how to do updates on the website. And when you update something and it's not compatible, then things break, and just managing all of the website things was something I needed to get off my plate. And so my first inclination was to look in groups that I was in to get a referral for somebody who handled websites. And that is where it started. So I don't know where to go from there.
Yeah. No, first of all, I love that like intro to this conversation because I think all business owners can relate to that experience of like, okay, I'm scrappy, I'm rolling up my sleeves, I'm doing a bunch of things that I'm not an expert in, but I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to throw things together and get it going. And you did reach that point, which I think all business owners do, where it's like, okay, I can't keep shouldering the burden for all of these things that happen in my business. So it's time to outsource it. So with that, and knowing that this was a piece, the website was a piece that you knew you wanted to outsource, why was it, just out of curiosity, that you were like, this is a thing that I need help with?
Yeah, I mean, as the business is growing, tracking data is something that has just become really important for me. So kind of tracking KPIs and knowing where conversions are coming from and where am I losing people in the checkout process, and having all of that data at my fingertips was something I really, really wanted. And I got a lot of the back end set up on my own, but like the ongoing reporting and monitoring and watching trends. And it's like, I just didn't need to add all of this to my plate.
Yes.
Plus the updates, plus, if I needed to add new landing pages and connecting the email service provider and all the pieces, it's a lot. And you kind of fall down that tunnel where, you're spending hours and hours when I could bring somebody on that this is what they do,
Yes.
and it takes them like 2 seconds to get it together.
Yeah.
Where for me, it's like a whole weekend. So
Yes, completely. I just want to stop and say that I love the fact that data was a key piece for you, because anyone who knows me knows that I love data. And that's a big piece of what I do with my clients on the marketing side is like, let's look at the data. What's it telling us? So I absolutely love that you wanted that, because not all business owners, I think, right, in all the things that we're trying to manage in our business, a lot of times marketing data isn't something that's necessarily top of mind. So I love that that was kind of one of the key catalysts for you being like, I really need someone to help with this.
Yeah. And especially because paid marketing hasn't really been a huge piece of my business building journey. A lot of it is organic and affiliates and relationships and referrals. And so it's important for me to know what's going on, so I know what to lean into and what to kind of step back from. And so that was kind of the driving factor, was that was just between the law firm and the online business, like drowning, and also trying to raise my daughter and be present as a wife and all the things. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. So you recognize these are some things I need help with, and you leaned to your network groups that you were in, which I think is very common, right? For business owners, we're parts of, usually, I think most of us are parts of a bunch of different groups, and, leaning on getting a referral probably, or did you just kind of like put a post out and ask for anyone who had expertise in that space?
It was more referrals within the group. I mean, it wasn't a huge group, so everybody kind of had their own different nuance in what they were doing in their business. So it came pretty quickly, and it was like the one person was the name that I kept getting. So that's kind of where I went.
Okay. So when you started working with them, what was that experience like? What kind of, like, were there things that went well? And then there were some things that you're like, it kind of got to a point where you're like, this isn't working for me. What happened?
So we tried a trial project first, because just for me, it was like, how are we going to work? And so landing page got set up. And at first I thought everything went well. So I thought everything was great. I'm like, okay, well then maybe we can do more of an ongoing maintenance package and kind of start building in more of the things like ad responsibility as the contract progresses. And I want to say within like a week after starting everything else, I found out that the initial landing page that got set up like wasn't even set up properly. And so I was losing a ton of email signups, and things were just, it was all bad. And then the website broke. Like literally broke. It just went offline. So that was kind of the beginning of the end. It was a very quick demise.
Oh man. So I'm curious, just because, I know ins and outs of website stuff to a degree, like, what was it was it just kind of like the look and design? You were like, oh, this looks great. Like I'm trying to think, like, in terms of people listening to the show, like, first of all, asking a provider to do a trial project, I think, is a great idea. That's a great tip for anyone listening to the show who might be looking to hire someone for a website or something else in their business. Asking for a trial project might be a good step to try and vet a provider. But what was it about the trial project switching to the other that was like, oh, you thought it was great, and then it wasn't so great?
Well, the aesthetics of the landing page were great. They were on brand. I have a really strong brand, and I like to make sure everything's kind of, you can tell it's coming from me. So it seemed like, oh, this is really great. She kind of picked up with it. She added her own artistic spin on it. It fit well. I had kind of tried it out, and it seemed like it was working. But I guess like once everything got finalized and published, it wasn't working anymore, because there was like duplicative codes that were installed and wrong directions for my email service provider. So it was, the aesthetics were great. The tech part, which is what I was hiring for, was not so great.
Gotcha. So what did you do? Like, well, first of all, how did you actually realize, right? Because again, thinking of listeners who might be tuning into this episode, they might think, how do you even know as a business owner, depending on how involved you've been in your website up until this point, how do you know that things are broken? Like, how did that become apparent to you?
So I got an email from somebody that was already in my world that said, hey, like, I went to the landing page and I'm getting this weird error message. And so then I went, and the page was just entirely down. So it was, okay, this, I'm out here sharing this and sending emails to my list, and everything's not functioning. So yeah, that was the first segue into that things weren't going right. And then I want to say it was probably like 3 or 4 days later that the entire site just went down.
So what happened? Like, did you like, I assume you reached out to the provider. Like, how did that conversation go? What kind of came out of that?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a freak out after I realized the landing page situation and was kind of like, well, I can go in and do my thing, but this is what I'm paying somebody to do. I shouldn't be spending all this time trying to fix the issue. So little freak out between that. And then when the website went down, I just kind of like had my own little mini inner meltdown. Like I'm such a control freak and such a perfectionist. So like handing like my website back end over to somebody was scary enough, let alone somebody that's in there like a bull in a china shop, essentially like breaking things. So essentially on the back end, they were kind of like installing and tweaking plugins to things that they were comfortable with versus what I was using in my business. And when I had reached out to this website maintenance person, lo and behold, she'd never managed a website like mine before, which she didn't tell me when we were just getting started. It was like, oh, yes, I can do this. I can handle it. And then I quickly found out that she'd never worked with WooCommerce before. She'd never worked with any of these things that were crucial for my website.
Okay. So that sounds like another big takeaway lesson learned, right? So even though, and I feel like the world of websites, because I've talked with past guests about websites, like the world of websites is so nuanced and there's so many factors that play into finding the right provider for you. So with your website, is your website on WordPress?
It is.
Yeah.
So it's not WordPress.com, it's WordPress.org because I wanted the freedom to be able to add my own plugins and custom code. Okay. And so there is a lot more freedom and artistic direction that I'm allowed. But it also means that if somebody doesn't know how to manage that type of website, there's issues.
Yeah, so I will be totally transparent and say, like, I didn't know that there was a difference between WordPress.org and WordPress.com. So even that nuance, it sounds like, was a big thing that made a difference in terms of having someone who knew how to manage your website and not. And like you said, those, not just the platform that it's on, but then the plugins that you're using.
Yeah, and it's funny because after the fact, right? Hindsight's 2020. I should have asked more specific questions about the WooCommerce site because that's where my business runs. That's the huge part of what hosts my legal shop on NicoleShrioden.com. But I had asked questions like, is this something that you can handle? Like, because she'd done the initial project. So I had assumed she'd gone in and seen the back end of everything and was comfortable and confident. And so it kind of just helped me realize that I need to be much more direct and particular in the questions that I ask when I'm hiring somebody. I mean, in that aspect, it was a really good lesson learned. But while in the thick of it with the website down and everything, it was not so fun.
Yeah, super stressful. I imagine, like, yeah, going to your own website and realizing the whole thing is broken. Like, I can't, like, that sinking feeling, like, just, it gives me anxiety just thinking about it for you. So, right, hindsight is 2020. And that's why, I mean, really, that's why I started this show, is because there are lessons learned for all of us looking back on decisions that we made about our marketing. And so how can we kind of tease out these lessons learned to help other business owners hopefully avoid some of those pitfalls and mistakes? So it sounds like asking more specific questions of the provider upfront on, have you worked with these specific technologies related to my website? Sounds like one.
Yep.
And then I wonder too, if my mind goes to like asking for example clients that they've used. I think especially when it comes to websites, right? That's a common, like, well, can I see an example of a website you've rebuilt or managed or something like that? Do you think that would have been something helpful as well to be like, is there a provider that you work with that has an online shop like I do? Can I see their website?
That would have been a better specific question. I think somebody who had something similar to what I was doing, because after the fact, I learned that she'd never managed any like e-commerce, anything ever before.
Which is that's a totally different beast.
It is.
I mean, obviously, you know that now.
Yeah. And I can acknowledge it and appreciate that. But it seems like, based on the conversations we had, that it was more of the desperation to get a client versus being honest about abilities. And, maybe I would have taken a chance if she would have just said, hey, I've never done this before, but I'd still like to work with you. Just based on the referrals I'd gotten, I might have still taken the chance.
Yep.
But it felt icky after the fact because it was almost like we were exaggerating our competence versus just being honest.
Right.
And then it just became a bigger mess, a more expensive mess for me to have to go find somebody that had the right credentials to clean it up. So, egg on my face for not asking the appropriate questions, but also, there's some level of honesty and, integrity, I think, that's expected as a service provider when you're working with clients, just to be honest about what you can and can't handle.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think that, I'm sure you know this, but I have to state the obvious. Like, it's so common, right? As far as the guests I've had on the show, you might have heard it in some of the past episodes you listened to. Like, there are so many things that's like, yeah, I didn't think to ask that. Like, so you're not like a standalone in that experience. Like, I think there's so many business owners who they don't know the questions to ask when they're vetting providers, be it for a website or social media or whatever it might be. As it relates to their marketing. So I think that that's super common. And that's why I love kind of teasing out, like, what are some of these things that you could ask next time around to help? So the technology side of things. I also just know, I know it hasn't come out in this conversation yet, but one of the things we talked about before was pricing and maybe that playing into your decision back then on who you were hiring. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like it was somebody I found on Fiverr or something. I mean, the price was higher than that, but it was like a competitive rate. Plus, given everybody's like, oh, this is what she does, it was kind of like, oh, a no-brainer. So I don't think because. So thank goodness we had a contract. That was the first thing. Like, obviously, as an attorney, I always ensure we have a contract. So that was kind of the first place, like, when everything went south after I had my mini internal meltdown, went to the contract and then just had to send that hard email like, hey, done, like, terminating the contract. Oh, and by the way, we haven't even achieved anything that we talked about achieving. So, the request for the refund was there. But I ended up finding somebody, taking that experience and knowing what I needed, who kind of stepped in, cleaned everything up, got everything running in a very, very quick amount of time. And the pricing, I mean, is competitive. I think it is more than what I was paying the other person, but not by a ton. So,
yep. Okay. I thought that might have been a thing, like looking at the cheapest option versus like what you actually needed. It sounds like maybe that wasn't quite an issue in this particular sense.
Yeah, it was part of it. And I think one of the other things, I'm such a big referral-based business owner. That's just, I've always been that way since I launched. And so it's also made me really look at the referrals that I'm getting and who they're coming from. And is it coming because of connections in a certain group, or is it coming because people have actually worked together? So that's a distinction that I've learned I have to make.
Yeah. That is such a great point. And I actually have my own experience that happened earlier this year. And it's just like resonating so much. I hired someone to help set up a CRM for me. And it was similar. Like, it came through connections in a group that I was in. And I was like, it was something I had kind of like planned for financially in my business. Like, okay, I'm like saving up and I'm going to do this thing because I know in order to set up the CRM, I want someone else to do it for me. To your point, know where I'm an expert and where I'm not. I don't want to get in the weeds of the tech of it. Like, I want to outsource it. And so I did. And then, I mean, she was perfectly capable of doing what she did, but the end result just wasn't something that met my needs. And so it was like this huge, like, like you have that, like, I should have asked more questions. I should have like done a better job. But because it's someone who comes so highly recommended and, you're in this close group, I think it can, especially when you're a business owner who really values relationships, it can be easy to just trust that because you're like, okay, well, I trust these people. And so they must be, telling me the best person. And then there's all this kind of nuance that we don't realize where, well, they might have been good for that job, but maybe they're not the right fit for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's definitely a lot of research that goes into play now, even when I get referrals. So my first step is still always ask for referrals now, but then there's a lot more independent questioning and vetting. And as you said earlier, maybe reaching out to prior clients, depending on what it is that I'm hiring for, to have a conversation about experiences. And if they don't have people that they can share, then that's kind of just a no for me normally.
Yes.
Normally.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. I really like it when potential clients ask me for like, can I talk to someone you worked with? Because I know I have great clients I can go to and like, they're only going to help sell me even more. So I think that's a great part of the process. Are there other questions or kind of processes that you've taken into account given this experience now as you move forward and hire other providers in your business?
I take it as a good learning experience for me because, as I said earlier, I'm such a perfectionist and such a control freak. It's hard for me to kind of hand the reins over and let people in, but I also know that I'm stymieing my own growth by doing that. So it's kind of had me create my own SOPs for when I bring people on in terms of kind of like a trial period, and grow into things, not kind of just dump everything on somebody's plate and like, good luck. Because the website manager that I've hired now, their contract is way more expensive than it was when I first brought them on, but they're doing so much for me now because I trust them, because we kind of gradually increase things. So I think that from a hiring perspective, it was a great learning lesson in terms of shoring up my SOPs and just making sure that I'm comfortable with the process too, and not just relying on referrals and thinking all is going to be sunshine and rainbows.
Yes. So this is such a great point. How did you go about creating your SOPs? Was it something you did on your own, or you hired someone to help with that part of it? Like, that is something I will be honest, I lack in my business, except for this one area where I've been working with someone and she's like, let's document things.
So it was a good kick in the pants for me to start documenting things. And so I have, for both businesses now, my own SOP document that I've created in Google Docs. And so it literally outlines every step of everything that I do. I document things with videos for especially things that I know that I'm going to hand off, because I'm in the process actually of onboarding an executive assistant here soon. And so there's a nice little document that's all created with videos about how to do things, and I can add as we grow. And so knowing that I have that going forward, and yes, it is a little bit of a time investment up front. It does take some time.
It sounds like, I don't know. For me, it sounds like a lot.
But knowing that I can just go on Zoom and screen share and like talk myself through the process and then take the audio and have that be transcribed, so much easier than just like the thought of SOPs and what do I do when I hire people? And so knowing that
that's such a great point. Yeah, that's such a great point. I've dabbled here and there with having VAs in my business, and I used Loom for that, like doing screen share. Like, okay, here's how I do this process, and I take this in there. But now you're right. Like now, especially with AI, that is much more readily available to be able to transcribe and turn it into an SOP document. Oh my gosh, I would think that AI could help a lot with that.
Yeah, it definitely streamlines.
Okay, I feel like I'm getting some ideas for myself and my business. Like, okay, the thought of creating SOPs now that we've like talked it all through doesn't sound so intimidating.
Yeah.
It's such a great point that having those documents and processes, right? Because in hindsight, with your business or your website specifically, the fact that you had WooCommerce and like all these things, like that would have all been included. So that definitely sets you up with that regard. But I'm sure in all other aspects of your business too, like hiring an executive assistant helps you just get that level of detail that you probably need to really make the right hire the first time.
Well, and just thinking about the amount of time it takes me to post a blog post, right? Because I have my blog post, but I also have to create the visuals that go with it. And then I have to post it, and I have to make sure the SEO is right. And then I have to share it. And when do I share it? And who do I like? It just keeps going. And it's like, oh my gosh, this thing that I'm like, oh, it's just easier for me to do is like a 2-hour process. And I can create this document and hand it off, and that's off my plate. And I'm on to something else that's actually going to be making me money. Not that the blogging strategy doesn't make me money, but that's like a long-term game versus actually being on a consult with a client. So
yes. Yeah. Awesome. This has been, I think, hugely helpful to our audience. So as we get ready to kind of wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share in terms of lessons learned through this experience, or just kind of want to hammer home on something that we mentioned before. Anything else?
So I briefly mentioned the contract and like going back to read the contract.
Having an attorney on the show, we have to talk about the contract.
Make sure you have a written contract in place and make sure that there are clear termination provisions about what happens if things go wrong and how you can get out of the contract. And that will save your hiney a million times over if you have that in place, because if you don't have a contract, it just makes things very messy. And so as long as you have something in writing that shows there was a meeting of the minds and how we're going to handle these things and what happens if there is a disagreement about something, then at least you have like a rule book that you can follow. So
awesome. That is a great, great takeaway. And I've never had anyone share it on the show. You are also my first lawyer on the show, so it all makes sense. So with that being said, Nicole, if any of our listeners today are like, oh gosh, I need to get my legal ducks in a row for my business, they want to learn more about you and the services that you provide, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so Nicole Shrioden Law is my law firm. You can go to the website, and that is my handle on basically every social media channel. And then for my template business, that is Legal Templates and More. Same thing, website and all social handles. So
awesome. Thank you so much for coming